The desert is silent before war begins. At dawn, the wind moves slowly across the cracked ground of western Iran. Dust drifts across abandoned farm roads, and the rising sun turns the mountains a dull shade of bronze. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks once. Then the sound disappears into the vast emptiness. Sergeant Daniel Mercer of the United States Army watches the horizon through scratched binoculars. His convoy has been parked for 3 hours. Engines off. Radios quiet. No one speaks unless necessary. Mercer sits on the hood of a Humvee, helmet tilted low against the glare of the sun. Sweat runs down the side of his face, disappearing into the collar of his combat uniform. His rifle rests across his knees, safety on but ready. Around him, the men of Alpha Company wait. Some pretend to check their gear. Others stare silently at the mountains ahead. Somewhere beyond those mountains lies the Iranian border defense network. And today, the war begins. Mercer lowers the binoculars and exhales slowly. Movement. Corporal Ramirez asks from the passenger seat. Mercer shakes his head. Nothing yet. Ramirez nods but keeps scanning the road behind them. No one trusts empty roads in a country that has spent decades preparing for invasion. The desert wind rises again. It carries the distant rumble of aircraft. Mercer looks up. High above the pale sky, faint contrails stretch like scars across the atmosphere. American bombers moving east. Somewhere far beyond the mountains, missiles are already falling. The war has already started. They just haven't seen it yet. A voice suddenly crackles over the radio. Alpha Company, this is command. Confirm readiness. Captain Ellis responds immediately. Alpha Company ready. A pause, then the words that change everything. Operation Iron Resolve is now active. Mercer feels the air grow heavier around him. After years of tension, sanctions, cyber attacks, and proxy wars, the United States and Iran are finally in open conflict, and his convoy is among the first units crossing into enemy territory. Engines start one by one. The quiet desert fills with the growl of armored vehicles. Mercer climbs into the Humvee and chambers around. Ramirez grips the steering wheel. You ready for this? Ramirez mutters. Mercer looks toward the mountains again. Those mountains hide soldiers who have been waiting for this war just as long. No one's ready, Mercer says quietly. The convoy begins to move. Dust rises behind the vehicles as they roll slowly toward the border road cutting through the valley. Above them, fighter jets scream across the sky. Missiles streak somewhere beyond the mountains. The first battle of a war that could change the world has begun, and Sergeant Mercer is driving straight into it. But neither he nor anyone in the convoy sees the Iranian reconnaissance drone silently watching them from the clouds above. The drone turns and transmits their position. The convoy pushes deeper into the valley. Engines rumble across the empty desert road as a column of armored vehicles stretches nearly half a mile behind Sergeant Daniel Mercer's Humvee. Dust clouds rise in thick waves, drifting slowly across the barren land like smoke from an unseen fire. The mountains ahead grow larger, steeper, darker. Mercer watches them through the windshield, every instinct telling him the same thing soldiers have feared for thousands of years. Mountains are perfect for ambushes. Inside the Humvee, the radio crackles with constant updates. Airstrikes across the country, missile exchanges in the Persian Gulf, cyber attacks crippling infrastructure. The war is expanding faster than anyone predicted. But here, in this silent valley, everything feels strangely calm. Too calm? Mercer adjusts the grip on his rifle. You feel that? Ramirez mutters. Mercer nods slowly. Yeah. The convoy commander's voice cuts through the radio. Alpha Company, maintain spacing. Watch the ridgelines. Every soldier in the column understands what that means. Eyes move upward, scanning cliffs, searching shadows. The road bends gently between two rocky slopes. Mercer studies the terrain. Loose rock, narrow approach, high ground on both sides. A perfect choke point. His stomach tightens. Ramirez, Mercer says quietly, but before he can finish, the world explodes. A blinding flash erupts 50 yards ahead. The lead vehicle disappears in a ball of fire as an improvised explosive device tears through the road. Beneath it, the shockwave slams into Mercer's Humvee like a hammer. Ramirez swerves. Contact. Gunfire erupts from the ridges above. Bright muzzle flashes spark across the rocks as Iranian fighters open fire with machine guns and rocket launchers. Bullets rip through the air, punching into vehicles, shattering glass, tearing into metal. The valley becomes chaos. Ambush! Ambush! Someone screams over the radio. Mercer throws open the door and dives behind the engine block. Dust and smoke choke the air. He raises his rifle and fires toward the ridgeline where shadows move. Between rocks, enemy fighters wearing desert camouflage shift positions. firing down into the trapped convoy. A rocket streaks through the sky. It slams into an armored truck halfway down the column. Another explosion. Flames rise 30 feet into the air. Mercer's heart pounds. This wasn't a random attack. The Iranians knew exactly where they would be. The drone above the clouds had done its job. Ramirez slides beside Mercer behind the Humvee. They boxed us in, he shouts over the gunfire. Mercer glances up the slopes again. More fighters appear. More weapons. Too many? The valley that looked empty an hour ago is now crawling with enemies. Mercer grabs the radio. Captain, we're pinned down. The response comes through heavy static. Hold the line. Air support is 10 minutes out. Mercer looks back toward the ridges. 10 minutes might as well be forever. Sergeant Daniel Mercer sees the rocket launcher a split second before it fires. The Iranian fighter stands silhouetted against the morning sky, halfway up the rocky ridge. His stance is steady, practiced. The launcher rests on his shoulder like it belongs there. Mercer doesn't think. He moves. Down, he shouts. Ramirez drops instantly. The rocket leaves the launcher with a violent burst of smoke. It streaks toward the Humvee. Mercer throws himself sideways as the rocket slams into the vehicle. The explosion tears through the engine block, ripping metal apart and sending burning fragments across the road. The blast wave throws Mercer into the dirt. For a moment, all he hears is ringing. Dust fills the air like thick fog. Somewhere nearby, someone is screaming. Mercer blinks hard, forcing his eyes open. The world returns in flashes, gunfire cracking across the valley. Radios shouting, overlapping commands, the roar of burning fuel. His Humvee is gone. The front half is a twisted mass of metal and flame. Ramirez. Mercer coughs. A hand grabs his shoulder. Ramirez drags himself through the dirt beside him, face streaked with dust but alive. I'm good, Ramirez says hoarsely. Mercer nods once. No time to celebrate. The ambush is tightening. Enemy fighters shift positions along the ridges, firing down with careful coordination. This isn't a scattered militia attack. These soldiers know the terrain. They know how to trap a convoy. Mercer peers through the smoke. 3 American vehicles ahead are burning. Another sits sideways across the road, its tires shredded. The convoy can't move forward. Behind them, more gunfire erupts. Mercer turns and sees the problem instantly. Enemy fighters have appeared behind the column too. They're closing the trap. Captain, Mercer shouts into the radio. They're flanking us. Static crackles. Then Captain Ellis's voice breaks through. All units, defensive perimeter. Hold positions until air support arrives. Mercer almost laughs. Hold the line. Easy words when rockets are falling from the sky. He reloads his rifle and crawls toward a pile of shattered rock beside the road. 2 other soldiers are already there, firing controlled bursts toward the ridge. Private Collins glances at Mercer. How many are up there? Mercer scans the rocks again. More ships move behind cover. More rifles. More launchers. Too many, Mercer answers quietly. Another rocket screams down from the ridge. It slams into the armored truck blocking the road. The explosion sends burning fuel spilling across the dirt like liquid fire. Heat blasts across the valley. The air smells of smoke, fuel, and burning rubber. Mercer wipes sweat from his eyes. Then something catches his attention. Movement on the upper ridge. A larger group of Iranian fighters is forming. They're organized, disciplined, moving with purpose. And in the center of them, a heavy machine gun is being set up. Mercer's stomach drops. If that weapon opens fire on the trapped convoy. The heavy machine gun appears over the ridgeline like a dark silhouette against the rising sun. Sergeant Daniel Mercer watches 2 Iranian fighters drag the weapon into position between jagged rocks. A third man feeds a long belt of ammunition into the chamber, the brass cartridges glinting briefly in the harsh desert light. Mercer knows that weapon, a 12.7mm heavy machine gun, designed to shred vehicles, designed to tear through armor, designed to erase men from existence. If it opens fire on the trapped convoy below, nothing on the road will survive. Mercer grabs the radio. Captain, they're setting up a heavy gun on the north ridge. Static crackles. Captain Ellis answers immediately. Coordinates. Mercer raises his rifle scope, steadying it against the rock. He scans the ridgeline. There, 3 fighters. Weapon mounted. Almost ready. Mercer quickly reads off the grid location. Ellis responds with tension in his voice. Copy that. Air support still 8 minutes out. 8 minutes. Mercer lowers the radio slowly. 8 minutes might as well be another lifetime. The Iranian gunner pulls the charging handle. The weapon is ready. Mercer glances around at the men beside him. Private Collins, Specialist Turner, Ramirez behind the shattered Humvee wreckage. They all see it. They all understand what's about to happen. Someone's gotta stop that gun, Collins says quietly. Mercer studies the ridge again. The distance is maybe 200 yards. Too far to rush across open ground. Too exposed to climb directly. But there is one narrow goat trail cutting through the rocks along the left side of the valley wall. A dangerous path. Barely visible, but possible. Mercer makes the decision instantly. He checks his rifle magazine. 30 rounds. Not enough for a long fight, but enough for one chance. He looks at Ramirez. I'm going up. Ramirez stares at him like he's crazy. That ridge is crawling with them. Mercer nods. Yeah. Another rocket streaks into the convoy behind them. Explosion. More screams. The heavy machine gun crew finish adjusting the weapon. The barrel slowly angles downward, toward the road, toward the trapped American vehicles. Mercer rises from cover. Ramirez grabs his arm. You're not making it back down from there, Ramirez says. Mercer looks at the burning convoy, at the wounded soldiers trying to crawl behind wreckage, at the heavy gun about to open fire. Then make sure someone tells my wife I tried, Mercer says quietly. Before Ramirez can answer, Mercer runs. He sprints across the open ground toward the narrow goat trail climbing the mountain. Bullets immediately slam into the dirt around him. Enemy fighters spot the movement. Shouts echo from the ridge. Mercer reaches the rocks and begins climbing. Above him, the heavy machine gun barrel lowers. The gunner grips the trigger, and Sergeant Daniel Mercer is climbing directly toward it. The rocks scrape against Sergeant Daniel Mercer's gloves as he climbs. The narrow goat trail twists along the mountain wall, barely wide enough for a single man. Loose gravel slides beneath his boots, threatening to send him tumbling back down into the valley below. Gunfire continues behind him. The convoy is still under heavy attack, but Mercer forces himself not to look back. Looking back gets soldiers killed. Above him, the ridge line grows closer. Shouts echo from the Iranian fighters positioned along the slope. Some have spotted him now. Their voices carry sharply through the dry desert air. Mercer hears the sound he feared most. The heavy machine gun opens fire. The weapon roars like a thunderstorm. A stream of massive rounds tears through the convoy below. Armored panels spark and shatter under the impact. One of the burning vehicles erupts again as the gun chews through its fuel tank. Mercer climbs faster. If he doesn't reach that ridge soon, there won't be anyone left to save. A burst of rifle fire cracks past his head. Stone chips explode from the rocks beside him. One of the Iranian fighters has moved down the slope to intercept him. Mercer presses his back against the cliff and raises his rifle. A figure appears above him, scrambling down through the rocks with an AK-style rifle. Their eyes meet for a split second. Both men fire at the same time. Mercer's rifle kicks once. The Iranian fighter stumbles. His weapon clatters against the rocks as he falls backward down the slope. Mercer doesn't wait. He keeps climbing. The heavy machine gun continues hammering the convoy below. Its rhythmic thunder shakes the valley walls. Closer now, 50 yards from the ridgeline. Mercer's lungs burn. Sweat stings his eyes. Another fighter appears ahead of him on the trail. This one is ready. The man fires first. The bullet slams into Mercer's shoulder. The impact spins him sideways against the rock wall. Pain explodes through his arm. For a moment, the world narrows to white heat. Mercer drops to one knee. Blood begins soaking through his uniform. Above him, the Iranian fighter reloads calmly, stepping closer down the trail. Mercer forces himself to breathe. If he collapses here, the machine gun keeps firing. The convoy dies. Mercer switches his rifle to his left hand. The soldier above raises his weapon again, but Mercer fires first. 2 shots. The enemy fighter jerks backward and collapses against the rocks. Mercer struggles to his feet, clutching his wounded shoulder. The ridgeline is only 20 yards above him now, but as Mercer climbs the final stretch, the heavy machine gun suddenly stops firing. The silence lasts only a second. Then he hears voices. More fighters. Many more. They're gathering at the top of the ridge. And Mercer realizes something terrifying. He hasn't been climbing toward 3 enemies. He's been climbing into the center of their entire position. Sergeant Daniel Mercer reaches the top of the ridge and immediately drops flat against the rocks. Voices echo only a few meters away. He slows his breathing, ignoring the sharp pain tearing through his shoulder. Warm blood continues to soak into his sleeve, sticky against the fabric of his uniform. Mercer carefully inches forward. Through a narrow gap in the rocks, the enemy position comes into view, and his heart sinks. There are far more fighters than he expected. At least 12 men move across the ridgeline, taking cover behind stone outcroppings and sandbags built into the natural terrain. Several carry rifles. 2 more kneel beside crates of ammunition. In the center of the position sits the heavy machine gun. The gunner adjusts the weapon calmly while another fighter reloads the long belt of ammunition. The barrel still glows faintly from the heat of sustained fire. Below them, the valley burns. Mercer can see the convoy through drifting smoke, vehicles destroyed, soldiers scrambling for cover behind shattered metal. They are completely exposed from this height. One pull of that trigger and the machine gun could sweep the entire road. Mercer clenches his jaw. If the weapon fires again, the ambush will be over in minutes. He studies the ridge carefully. The fighters are confident, relaxed even. None of them expect an American soldier to be lying only 20 yards away in the rocks. Mercer quietly removes a fragmentation grenade from his vest. His fingers tremble slightly as he pulls the pin halfway out, holding the lever tight. One grenade won't kill all of them, but it might buy enough chaos. Mercer glances toward the sky. Still no aircraft. Still no help. He whispers to himself. Okay, one shot. Mercer pulls the pin completely free. He counts silently. 1, 2. Then he rises from behind the rocks and throws. The grenade arcs through the air and lands directly beside the machine gun crew. For half a second, no one understands what has happened. Then, the explosion shatters the ridge. Dust and fire erupt across the position. The heavy machine gun flips sideways as the blast throws two fighters into the rocks. Mercer charges forward instantly. Rifle raised, gunfire erupts across the ridge as stunned Iranian fighters scramble for cover. Mercer fires controlled bursts, forcing them back from the weapon. Two enemies fall. Another dives behind a rock wall, but Mercer is already moving toward the machine gun. If he can destroy it, the convoy might survive. He reaches the weapon just as another fighter rushes toward him from the side. The man swings his rifle like a club. Mercer barely raises his arm in time. The impact sends both men crashing into the rocks. They struggle violently in the dust, hands grabbing, boots slipping, weapons lost somewhere in the chaos. The Iranian fighter is stronger, younger. Mercer's wounded shoulder weakens his grip. The man pulls a combat knife from his belt. Mercer sees the blade flash in the knife flashes downward. Sergeant Daniel Mercer twists his body just enough to keep the blade from plunging into his chest. The steel scrapes across the plate carrier on his vest, sending sparks into the dust. The Iranian fighter snarls, pushing harder. Mercer's wounded shoulder screams with pain as he tries to hold the man back. They struggle violently across the rocks, boots sliding over loose gravel near the edge of the ridge. 20 yards below them, the mountainside drops sharply toward the valley floor. One wrong movement, and both men fall. The fighter raises the knife again. Mercer reacts instinctively. He slams his helmet forward, smashing it into the man's face. The impact stuns him for a split second. Mercer grabs the man's wrist and drives it sideways into the rocks. The knife slips from the fighter's grip and skids across the dirt. But the fight isn't over. The Iranian soldier punches Mercer directly into his wounded shoulder. White-hot pain explodes through Mercer's arm. He almost blacks out. The fighter lunges forward again, trying to shove Mercer off the ridge entirely. Mercer digs his boots into the dirt. Both men strain against each other, breathing hard, faces inches apart. Then Mercer sees something behind the fighter. The heavy machine gun, only a few feet away, still intact, still loaded. Mercer makes a desperate move. He releases the fighter's arm and suddenly shoves him sideways. The sudden shift throws the man off balance. Mercer dives toward the machine gun. The fighter recovers instantly and charges, but Mercer reaches the weapon first. He spins the heavy barrel around just as the fighter lunges toward him. The trigger roars. The massive weapon erupts with thunder. The fighter is thrown backward by the impact. The machine gun continues firing, its recoil shaking Mercer's entire body as he sweeps the barrel across the ridge. Iranian fighters scatter for cover. Rocks explode under the hail of heavy rounds. One fighter falls behind a sandbag wall. Another disappears behind a boulder. Mercer finally releases the trigger. Smoke rises from the glowing barrel. The ridge falls silent except for the distant echo of gunfire in the valley below. Mercer breathes heavily. His shoulder throbs with every heartbeat. But he has the machine gun now. He slowly turns the weapon downward, toward the valley road, toward the ambush positions where enemy fighters continue firing on the trapped convoy. Mercer grips the trigger again. If he uses their own weapon against them, he might be able to break the entire ambush. But as he lines up the first target, he hears something behind him. Footsteps, several of them. Mercer glances over his shoulder. 5 Iranian fighters are climbing the ridge toward him, and they are only seconds away. The footsteps are close, too close. Sergeant Daniel Mercer doesn't have time to turn the machine gun around. The weapon is massive, heavy, designed for mounted defense, not for a wounded soldier fighting alone on a ridge. The 5 Iranian fighters rush forward between the rocks. Their rifles are already raised. Mercer reacts instantly. He releases the machine gun and dives sideways behind a low sandbag wall just as bullets slam into the weapon's metal frame. Sparks burst into the air. The ridge explodes with gunfire. Mercer rolls onto his backhand, grabs his rifle from the ground where it fell during the fight. He fires twice. The first attacker drops behind a rock. The others spread out quickly, moving with trained coordination. They advance in short bursts, covering each other as they close the distance. Mercer's heart pounds. These aren't random fighters. They're soldiers. He crawls behind another rock as bullets punch through the sandbags beside him. Dust sprays across his face. His wounded shoulder burns with every movement. He checks his rifle magazine. 10 rounds left. Below the ridge, the convoy still fights for survival. The sound of distant gunfire echoes through the valley, like a storm trapped between mountains. Mercer knows he can't hold this position forever, but he only needs a few seconds. Just enough time. He glances back toward the heavy machine gun. The weapon sits only 6 feet away, half hidden by dust and smoke. If he can reach it again, he hears boots crunching against the rocks. Closer now. One of the fighters moves around the side of the sandbag wall, trying to flank him. Mercer raises his rifle. The man appears suddenly from behind the rock. Mercer fires. The fighter collapses instantly, but another one opens fire from the ridge behind him. Bullets slam into the rocks around Mercer, forcing him flat against the ground. Mercer's breathing grows heavier. 7 rounds left. Another fighter charges forward with surprising speed, firing from the hip. Mercer shoots twice. The man falls beside the machine gun. The remaining 2 enemies pause, taking cover behind rocks only 15 yards away. For a moment, the ridge falls quiet. Dust drifts slowly across the battlefield. Mercer wipes sweat from his eyes. He knows what they're doing, waiting, preparing for a final push. Then Mercer hears something else, a distant sound growing louder. At first it's faint, almost lost in the wind, but then the sound becomes unmistakable. Jet engines, fast, very fast. Mercer looks up toward the sky. 2 dark shapes scream over the mountains, American fighter jets, and they are diving straight toward the valley battlefield. The roar of jet engines tears across the valley like thunder. Sergeant Daniel Mercer lifts his head just enough to see them. 2 American fighter jets streak over the mountains at terrifying speed, their dark silhouettes cutting through the pale desert sky. They descend sharply toward the battlefield below. The sound alone freezes the ridge. Even the Iranian fighters pause. For a brief moment, everyone looks up. Mercer knows exactly what that means. Air support has finally arrived. One of the jets rolls sideways in the sky, exposing the weapons mounted beneath its wings. The aircraft dives lower, lining up along the valley floor where the ambush positions are scattered among the rocks. Mercer hears the pilot's voice faintly through the radio static. Alpha Company, this is Viper 1. Mark your position. Mercer grabs the radio with his good hand. Viper 1, enemy positions on North Ridge and Valley floor. Danger close. The response comes instantly. Copy that. Stand by. The jet screams past the ridge. A heartbeat later, the missiles fire. 2 streaks of white smoke cut through the air, slamming into the ambush positions along the valley floor. The explosions erupt like miniature earthquakes, sending massive fireballs rolling across the desert. The shockwave reaches the ridge seconds later. Dust blasts upward around Mercer and the remaining fighters. The 2 Iranian soldiers hiding behind the rocks realize the battle has changed. One of them fires wildly toward Mercer before sprinting down the opposite side of the ridge. The other follows immediately. They're retreating. Mercer doesn't chase them. He's too exhausted to move. Below the ridge, the second jet makes its attack run. The aircraft opens fire with its cannon. A stream of high-velocity rounds tears across the valley, ripping through enemy vehicles and hidden firing positions. The ambush collapses under the sudden assault from the sky. Mercer slowly pushes himself to his feet. The heavy machine gun still sits beside him. He turns the weapon downward once more. Now the battlefield is different. Enemy fighters are running. Some drop their weapons. Some disappear into the mountains. Mercer squeezes the trigger. The machine gun roars again, cutting off the last organized resistance along the ridge. After several seconds, he releases the trigger. Silence slowly returns to the mountains. Smoke rises from the valley road. Burning vehicles. Scattered wreckage. But the convoy is still there. Still fighting. Still alive. Mercer exhales slowly and leans against the rocks. For the first time since the ambush began, the battle is finally turning. But far beyond the valley, beyond the mountains and the burning desert, this small fight is only the beginning of something much larger. A war that is already spreading across the region. And Sergeant Mercer has no idea that within the next 24 hours, this conflict will drag half the world into it. Smoke drifts slowly across the valley. The air smells of burned fuel, hot metal, and dust. Sergeant Daniel Mercer sits against the rocks on the ridgeline, breathing heavily as the battlefield below settles into an uneasy silence. His wounded shoulder throbs with every heartbeat, but the adrenaline that carried him up the mountain is beginning to fade. Below him, the convoy is still alive, damaged, burning, but alive. Several soldiers move cautiously between the wrecked vehicles, dragging wounded men into cover and checking the destroyed trucks for survivors. The radio traffic that once screamed with panic now carries short, controlled commands. The ambush is over. Mercer watches the fighter jets circle once more above the valley before climbing back into the clouds. Their engines fade into the distance, leaving only the wind moving across the mountains. For a moment, the battlefield feels strangely quiet. Then Mercer hears boots crunching on the rocks behind him. He turns slowly. 3 American soldiers are climbing the ridge. Ramirez leads them. His face is covered in dust, and his uniform is torn across the shoulder, but he is grinning like a man who has just cheated death. When he reaches the top, he stops and stares at the machine gun beside Mercer. "You actually did it," Ramirez says, shaking his head in disbelief. Mercer gives a tired shrug. Seemed like a good idea at the time. The other soldiers scan the ridgeline carefully, rifles raised. Bodies of Iranian fighters lie scattered between the rocks, evidence of how desperate the fight became. Ramirez kneels beside Mercer and examines the blood soaking through his sleeve. That doesn't look good. Mercer glances down at the wound. Feels worse. Ramirez pulls a field bandage from his pack and begins wrapping the shoulder tightly. Below them, more American vehicles arrive at the edge of the valley. Reinforcements. Armored transports roll slowly through the smoke, soldiers pouring out to secure the battlefield. Captain Ellis's voice finally reaches Mercer over the radio. "Sergeant Mercer, report." Mercer lifts the handset weakly. "North Ridge secure. Heavy weapon neutralized." There is a short pause on the other end. Then Ellis answers quietly, "Good work, Sergeant." Mercer leans back against the rock, staring across the endless desert beyond the mountains. Somewhere far away, new battles are already beginning. Missiles flying, ships moving, armies mobilizing. What happened in this valley today will barely appear in tomorrow's reports. Just one firefight in the opening hours of a much larger war. But Mercer knows something the reports won't show. If that machine gun had kept firing, none of the men in that convoy would have survived the morning, and the war would have already taken dozens more lives. Yet as the wind sweeps across the silent ridge, Mercer feels something deeper in his chest, a quiet understanding. This war is only beginning, and next time. Night falls slowly over the valley. The desert that burned with explosions only hours ago now lies under a cold, dark sky. Small fires still flicker between the wrecked vehicles scattered along the road. Mechanics and medics move through the smoke with flashlights and quiet voices. The battlefield has become something else now, a place of counting survivors, counting the wounded, counting the dead. Sergeant Daniel Mercer sits on the lowered ramp of an armored transport while a medic finishes stitching the wound in his shoulder. The pain is dull now, wrapped in layers of bandages and exhaustion. Ramirez stands nearby, sipping warm water from a metal canteen. "Doc says you're lucky," Ramirez mutters. Mercer manages a faint smile. "Doc always says that." Across the valley, floodlights illuminate the ridge Mercer fought on only hours earlier. Soldiers carefully search the rocks, collecting weapons and documenting enemy positions. The heavy machine gun still sits where Mercer left it, a silent witness to the fight that nearly destroyed the convoy. Captain Ellis approaches slowly through the dust. His face is harder now than it was that morning. War does that quickly. He stops in front of Mercer. For a moment, he doesn't speak. Then he nods once. "You saved a lot of lives up there." Mercer looks toward the ridge again. "It was just timing." Ellis shakes his head. "No, it was a decision." The captain kneels beside him. "Intel confirmed something an hour ago. That ridge wasn't just an ambush team." Mercer looks up. Ellis continues quietly. "It was part of a larger defensive network along the border. If they had held that position, the rest of our battalion would have driven straight into it." Mercer exhales slowly. So the fight on that mountain meant more than he realized. Much more. In the distance, the deep rumble of aircraft crosses the sky again. Transport planes, bombers, more forces entering the war zone. Ramirez looks up into the darkness. "Sounds like this thing's getting bigger." Ellis doesn't answer right away. He stares out toward the endless desert stretching east. Then he finally says the words no one wants to hear. "It already is." Far beyond the valley, missiles are launching across the region. Naval fleets are moving through the Persian Gulf. Nations are choosing sides. What began as a single convoy crossing a quiet desert road has now become the first spark of a conflict that may reshape the entire world. Mercer watches the horizon silently. The wind moves across the dark mountains, Somewhere out there, other soldiers are preparing for their own battles. And tomorrow, Sergeant Daniel Mercer will be sent forward again. Because wars like this don't end in a single valley. They only begin there.